Good evening, everyone. Tonight, not really sure what I'm going to be working on. I have an idea for picking up the WordPress stuff, but I'm not. So I know what I want to work on. I just don't know how in depth I want to go. Because part of me wants to actually try and do a proper package, but that's also maybe me falling into some of my bad habits of being not being very pragmatic. I really just need this code to work. And if I let myself get bogged into actually creating a package out of it, that might slow me down a bit. So if I can find a way to do this where it doesn't bog me down, I think that would probably be the best approach. So I'm going to see if I can do like a hybrid thing, maybe actually start building it out as a proper package, but building it within the repository rather than trying to completely build a brand new repo and all of those sorts of things. So I think that's probably the approach I'm going to take, but we'll see how far I get into it before I change my mind, in case I change my mind. One thing I did want to share was the work that we did on the stream not too long ago finally made its way into Blackfire. So people using Laravel right now, if you also use Blackfire, it can now, or Blackfire can now actually let you know where you have lazy loaded objects, so or lazy loaded relationships. So that's in. Might actually try it out maybe a little bit later if we get tired of the WordPress thing. But yeah, so that's a thing that's out there now. So that's pretty awesome. Makes me pretty excited. And I know that a couple of people helped with that, so I appreciate all of the help people gave. I also managed to resurrect my Typora theme. The themes were really bad for some reason, so I brought back my old Astrocast theme just so that it's a lot bigger and easier to read, and I sort of like this format for tracking ideas and things we wanted. So last session we had a little list of things that we were actually working on, and so I moved these into sort of goals and want to sort of plan out what we're actually going to be doing. The other thing is that if you were here on last night's stream, we were trying to get pages to load, and that actually works now. So let me see if I can go to my site, and I'll actually pull up the code to show where that was actually fixed, because it was kind of annoying what we had to do in the end, but ended up having to do something with ngrok to actually get it to work. Okay, so this is a sample page. I marked all of the pages in my WordPress backend to be unpublished, so that they wouldn't actually show up anywhere. But you can see that the URL is actually beausimensen.com/sample page. So if you want to go here, you could. It's not going to be linked from anything, but it is still possible to see it. And just to show how it actually works, I'm going to pop into the editor. Oh, no, I don't want to publish it. I'm going to save the draft. That's what I'm going to do. So if I go and view this, yeah, so here's the content. So the webhook did fire, the webhook sent across the page information, and most everything that we had in place actually worked more or less out of the box. The only thing that we needed to do, and this was pretty much what I expected, was we had to have the right key. Get it from correct place, yeah. So rather than request JSON type or request JSON post type, this was my second guess, and that one didn't work. When that one didn't work, I realized I needed to actually do some actual proper feedback or get some proper feedback from ngrok to tell me what this payload actually looked like. And what happens is that it does have the post ID, which is great. And then it also has a post object that looks more or less like the payload that we're using otherwise. So getting in there and figuring that out was pretty, everything worked the way that we expected it to. We just needed to make sure and get this post type from the correct location. So in the meantime, I realized that it's possible we need to have more, we need to have another field in the WordPress post table. We need to have a type. Because if we don't have a type, then what ends up happening is, we can probably see it here. I think the pages will show up. Sample page, yeah, so sample page shows up here on the articles page because of course it does. It's actually a post as far as anything is concerned. So we do need to probably add a post type, and then we'll probably also do a scope non-pages. And I don't know enough about WordPress actually to know what really makes the most sense here, because I know that you can add custom post types. I don't know if you can add custom page types. Press custom page type. Because I know that you can do custom content types, and maybe it doesn't matter which is which. But I think that pages are probably just a special instance of post. And so, let's see, putting custom archive page, custom post types. Interesting. We can do for you. I think the big thing is that it gives you the ability to maybe give different fields. So you can actually have, yeah, so this actually gives you different fields. Oh no, this is saying how you handle each action. So a name, so it's going to be products, singular name, it's product, add news, add new. So this sort of makes sense, but I feel like you can probably also add additional data inputs beyond just what is normally there. But also I think that if someone was going to do a bunch of custom post types, they probably would just want to be within WordPress. But I don't think I'm going to worry about this too much, other than trying to make sure that I accurately account for the difference between post and page, and maybe keep it open so that people can query other things correctly in case they do happen to have a custom post type. So as long as that case is covered, I think it's probably all we really need to worry about. All right, so the other night we actually had open a bunch of pieces of code on Beau Simensen. I'm going to see if I can replicate that. So first we're going to look at our migrations, WordPress author, WordPress posts, post table, tags, and WordPress authors. So I did mention that we were using Spotty's tag package. I don't know. We'll have to look to see what kind of impact that might have on people. Like if we create a package that relies on another package, I don't really know how that works within Laravel. But hopefully it's not a huge problem. I think the main thing would be whether or not the default migration is usable. I think maybe the migration that went with it wasn't actually supporting multiple types. And you do have the ability to do things like use your own model. So give me tag model. That would be the only thing that could maybe be a little weird if someone was trying to use this and we're using a third-party package that maybe they're already using, which I know is an issue with projects like Guzzle, where if you use a dependency that uses, if you use two different dependencies that use two different conflicting versions of Guzzle, you're kind of out of luck in a lot of ways. I think there's probably some workarounds for it, but not the happiest situation to be in. See what the tags configuration looks like. Yeah, there wasn't a lot to the tags. I should see if the migration has more than one. Create tag tables. Oh, actually, there's tagables too. I don't remember actually seeing tagables. I should double check that and see. So we have tags. I guess I do have tagables. Okay, so maybe the migrations here are just going to work, and I don't have to do anything, which would actually be pretty nice if that's the case. Maybe I'll just leave it. Okay, so we have our migrations. We have some. We have the WordPress API class, and pods. Yeah, we have change post, delete post, which I think were pretty straightforward. Models, offer post. We have the webhooks. Might be. Oh, there were some console commands. Probably copy those across as well. We had sync post, sync page, sync post. It's possible I may want to do sync pages separately. Since we have to have two separate console commands, that might actually make to split those up as well. But we don't necessarily have to worry about that right now. All right, so I'm going to pop into repository. So let's go to. I have some ideas for trying to dump this all in another package. So creating a package beside the actual application so that we can bypass having to do any weird things to work in a composer package in another directory. So if we go in and create, let's see, if we go in and create the that's NAS work I've been working on. I think if we put the package, the core of the package, just in a different directory with PSR4 mappings, I think that would be enough to make this work well for me. So I think what I'm going to do is composer JSON, and let's see, so PSR4. So I actually have autoload mapped for dplydiff diff to source. So I don't have to actually modify this, which is awesome. So I can put stuff in source. I'm going to do directory, let's call it Headless WordPress. Okay, so I'm going to do some searches for best practices creating Laravel package. I could probably just look at some examples. Follow this version, package design, package development. So orchestral test bench is something I haven't really done anything with because I've not made any major Laravel packages in the past. But this is something that we would probably have to do if we decide to fully extract this package out. Package discovery, I think that's actually something that I would want to add into the provider. So this is actually, this goes into Composer JSON, so this is something that we would have to do after we actually spin out the package. Package discovery, service providers, configuration, boot, so this is standard configuration things. Called package configuration. Okay, so this is actually this is going to be important stuff because this is where we will be merging the code from what we ship versus what the user actually puts into place. So this is actually going to be something important for us. So let's start here. Let's do new directory called config, which matches the Laravel config directory. And then let's do PHP file. We'll do Headless WordPress. This is going to be the default configuration for our application. And I don't know what that's going to look like just yet. What kind of things we're going to have other than added, I think. Actually, I didn't. I know that what we had before is going to have to be different. So WordPress. Yeah, so this was what we had previously. Yeah, we're going to have to change what this looks like, but we're just going to leave it here for now. And then we're going to create, let's see where the docs are here. I think people usually put it in just the support directory or the SRC directory, but I want to double check that to see if that's true. So the package itself is supposed to mostly mirror what a normal Laravel application looks like. It's just like a mini subset of that. But let's look at the Didn't we just have this open? Yeah, here we go. So yeah, so source, and then so people, it looks like, at least in this case, they aren't actually putting this under, they aren't doing anything special to break these out. Everything's just in the top level source directory. So maybe I'll stick with that convention as well. And actually, I'm realizing as we're doing this that if I'm trying to create a mini package, then I can't do it because this it's not going to be PSR4 if I do it this way. So I'm going to move this to a new top level directory, and we'll do call it packages. Then we're going to move this to packages, and then we are actually going to have to modify Composer JSON. So we're going to do dplyr dev source, and then dplyr dev, and what do we call it? Laravel Headless WordPress. And that is going to point to packages / Laravel Headless WordPress. And actually, while we're here, I might just make this be more like an actual mini vendor directory. All right, so Laravel Headless WordPress. We don't really need the Laravel name inside the config directory, so I think this is what we need to install. Oh. I want to see dependencies. Okay. With the Spotty package, they have database migration, so they are following that convention here. Probably do that as well. Oh, that's interesting. They don't actually have a. If that's part of Laravel. They don't have a prefix, so I wonder if the migrations actually get their own prefix. If the packages is migration. It's big tables. I'm not actually sure how this works. I'm not sure why this is considered a sub, unless there's something else going on here. Ah, okay. Interesting. So okay, so what's going on here is actually more advanced than what is going on there, and I'm not sure I'll follow this or not. The sole purpose that appears here is that they're using a simpler name, and they're using stuff in the boot method to generate a time-stamped version of the file name. Which I think is great. I think that's actually really cool. But I don't know if I want to do like a .stub name here, because that would, well, for one, it would mess up my IDE that's not going to know what .stub it is. So, well, and for that matter, GitHub didn't know what .stub meant. So I'll either do .stub.php, or I'll just call it create whatever tables.php. The other side effect of this is that someone could potentially generate or try to publish the migration multiple times, and it's always going to have the current timestamp. But that means that they may end up with the same migration multiple times. I don't think that's a huge risk for people, but it would definitely be something that I don't think people normally think about right now. Like, I don't usually think about that if I'm looking at, say, installing an application and I publish the migrations, I usually assume that the timestamp was in the service provider to begin with. So I don't know. But it is nice to see how they actually did that, because when I saw the stub file, I'm like, I don't understand. There's nothing in here about stub files. Okay, so wait, this even is wrong. So I'm going to change this to source, because we need to have the code actually in another directory. Source, which means I need to run this again. And so first thing we'll do is Headless WordPress provider. And this is going to implement provider interface. Provider interface. Go. Implement methods. Extends service provider. Okay. Makes sense. Okay, so now, oh. Now we should be able to override methods, so we'll override boot. No? So the one difficult thing sometimes working with Laravel is the reliance on magic methods. Something somewhere looks to see if this class has a boot method. Not relying on interfaces, it's not relying on the fact that service provider class actually has a boot method. It's just looking to see if this instance of a service provider has a boot method that's publicly accessible. You know, it's not super bad, but it does make it difficult sometimes to rely on tooling to kind of help you out. Like, what's the actual method signature for boot? I don't know. You know, if it was actually coming from, say, one of these other methods that actually has something defined, say load view as components, it fills in everything for me because it has to know what these things are. But with boot, I don't know, no help given by the IDE. So I'm going to copy this same logic. So if not class exists, create tag tables. I'm going to, oh, that's actually interesting. What I said earlier was you might end up with multiple migrations created. You won't, because as long as the migration created this class name, you won't have to worry about it. So that's a good thing. Let's see, are the migrations still not, yeah, they're still not namespace, which kind of annoys me. But there's not a whole lot of it, I guess. I'm not going to try and change that right now. We'll do create headless WordPress tables. And probably use the same logic here. And we'll do migrations, no, database. I can do that. Yeah, cool. And then PHP file to create Headless WordPress tables. And we'll do .stub, because I do like the idea of giving people the idea that it's a stub file, but usually it doesn't really matter if the class isn't changing at all. So kind of on the fence on this one. I'm going to take it off. I reserve the right to change my mind later. So let's do migrations, create Headless WordPress tables. And it's going to publish it to migrations. So the database path, migrations, timestamp, and then we're going to do same name here. So we're leveraging pretty heavily the work done by Spotty's package for this, which I'm fine with. And then configuration-wise, it's going to publish Headless WordPress to headlesswordpress.php. And I think, actually, now that I think about it, it might actually make sense to add this to Composer.json for the auto-discovery pieces. Because otherwise, I have to manually add them anyway. So I'm going to do, I think I am going to do auto discovery. So that was package discovery. So providers, aliases, Laravel's big app. And also define the providers in extra sections. So in extra, we already have Laravel. So what we're going to do is add providers. Service provider is this one. So copy reference. There's just a hack to, or a shortcut to make sure I don't typo something here. And WordPress is going to be into a facade, which I don't know if this has a facade. I don't know if I need one, but let's assume I will. And part of this is trying to make sure that I'm doing things that will be Laravel friendly-ish. To WordPress facade. I think the way that I'm going to have this work is the facade is actually going to be a reference to the we talked about having a alias, not an alias, a factory. So this WordPress API client, or whatever we're going to call it, is going to be what the facade references, but we can then request the actual instance for a specific instance of a WordPress blog. Okay, so I think if we do this, if I do Composer install, it may, actually, first of all, I'm going to create the facade, just so it's there. I suspect if it does auto discovery and it can't find this class, it'll probably have an issue. So let's see. Actually, I can do. I'm gonna delete this and see if. I want to see if the Code Intel tool or the extension will actually be able to figure this out correctly. If I ask it to make a facade, it knows. Oh, it doesn't. Okay, never mind then. I can. I guess I can't. Facade. Alright, so I'm going to extend facade. Supervise. I don't know why that's. All right, so now if I call composer install, hopefully we don't get any errors. Run composer update or. Find it. Did not. All right, so let's do deploy update and just update the lock file because I think that's the issue here. Oh, interesting. That seems very suspicious to me. Oh. Eek. Supernova just joined. Excuse me, sir, your lock file is not up to date. Indeed. I actually don't remember why I'm referring to that dflydev package, or that dflydev branch. Dev dflydev. Like, I actually moved that? So Supernova's asking what I'm wrapping my composer with. I'll show that in just a minute. That's actually a packet, something that I want to do more streaming on because it's a package that I've been using, or it's a project I've been using, and pretty much dogfooding it at this point. But I'll do that in just a second. I need to figure out what to do here real quick. To find out where this is at. So 114, most recent. I think that's probably fine. So I'm going to do 210.1. I think I actually had a. I did have a fork of this for a little while because probably gonna hurt. I had a fork of this package for a little while because it didn't actually support leads, and I didn't find out until probably much later than I'd like to admit that Pipedrive leads is like pretty brand new, like July new of last year. So there's a bunch of features and functionality that doesn't really exist for leads yet, including like the API for it that this person was. They were maintaining this, so I had to actually implement something. I think even on the stream the other day, we saw that deals, people, organizations all have an integer as their ID, but leads have a UUID. So little things like that just weren't supported right out of the box. And also there was an issue with the fact that post data to a deal or post data to a person or an organization, you could just do a standard form post, form data post, where leads needed to be a JSON post. So that was kind of the big thing there. This was another thing that came up on a recent streaming session where this, if this is not set, throw an exception with that value's error. So yeah, I have had to fork this because I'll run into issues, and the person that manages this package has been super awesome at being pretty quick to put some of these things together, or accept the pull requests or do some reviews and things like that. But sometimes it was too slow. Anyway, apparently I did something with the lock file that gave me a version that worked just fine, but I had removed the repository entry. So Composer now, when I do an update, doesn't know how to get there anymore. It's like, oh, what's dev, or what's whatever it was, dplydev -dev. I didn't know what to do with that. Okay, so let's see here. Did we get it? We didn't. Okay, so we did an update. It does not look like it actually picked up my packages for auto discovery. Which makes me kind of sad. I really thought that's all we needed to do to get that to trigger. So it's possible it doesn't look in the root package. I'm going to add that to my list of things to look into. So we've got, hold on here, I want to look at event. Okay. So if you're not super familiar with the way that Composer works, there's a subtle difference between the actual application that you're running Composer install or Composer update on versus the things that Composer brings in. And the only difference between that is the context in which you're actually running Composer. Because you can run Composer install on a library, and then at that point in time, that library is going to be, at that point in time, the library will be the root package. And then if you bring that library in as a dependency, another application requires it, it is no longer the root package. The root package is now the thing requiring it. So I'm guessing that for whatever reason, probably because people didn't anticipate someone wanting to do what I'm doing here, which seems to happen more often than I'd like to admit, that we weren't actually able to do this right now, because this really should have worked, but it didn't. So Warpig just joined in and asked if single page applications are they bad business, I guess is what is being asked. I don't know. I think it depends. I think some of them are implemented quite annoyingly, but I think if places are actually okay and handle it well, I think it's not that big of a deal. Are they clunky? Again, I think it really depends on the implementation. Like some applications that are single page applications to me run just like a desktop app, and I absolutely love them. And then others are just like, I want to bang my head against the wall because why would anyone do this way? I just don't do it. And a lot of it has to do with how smoothly they go from thing to thing. So I think Trello is a pretty good example of a single page application that's actually really nice. Changing context between different sections, it doesn't feel clunky to me at all. But other applications, I'm trying to think of a good example of one that I really don't like, or where it feels like, what was the point? But yeah, I don't think they are. So it has a method of build. Yeah, I guess so. I think that like with anything, if it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good, then maybe better not to. Yep, you'd want to definitely you'd want to avoid certain things. Don't do things just because you think they are. I guess the thing that bugs me the most is the breakdown between the expectations of how a web application is supposed to work, or how a web application is supposed to work. Yeah. So like with Pipedrive, actually it does have some of that in it, that in some cases I can click on something and open things and it takes me where it's supposed to go. In other cases, it doesn't. I'm trying to think of where maybe it wouldn't in this case. Let's see here. Yeah, because that one, clearly the one that I did, of course, worked, because that's the way things go. If I go to my activities, I look, these are all working correctly, or at least the way that I would expect. So I guess, so this was kind of weird because it still opened up the application, but it opened it in a way that wasn't necessarily expected. But I don't know. That's kind of a personal preference sort of thing. So yeah, so I don't know. What has your experiences been with those, Warpig? Supernova, are you still there? Should I go through Contrail real quick? We've been talking about this auto discovery thing, but I don't want to go into talking about the wrapper that I put into place. Okay, so Supernova is still there, so we're going to do that real quick. This is a tool called Contrail, and what Contrail does is it aims to sort of be a bridge between full-on Docker environment and something like Homestead, where you want to, if you want to have easily fire up a build for a brand new Laravel application. I know that there is, I can't remember the name for the built-in thing with Laravel now. I can't remember. Vagrant is silly though. Well, not necessarily. It is kind of, there's a very small difference between Vagrant and Docker on Mac, really, because Docker is essentially Docker on Mac is a VM that you're interfacing through Docker. You aren't actually running it locally, natively, like you would be on Linux. So I'm going to actually put this to the test. So I'm going to create a new Laravel app. I think I can just I'll just try it. Composer, yeah, Composer, create project, Laravel, and we'll do Supernova. And so it's going to pull everything in, and what is the Laravel Docker? Sale. It's funny because I didn't really pay attention at all to this particular package when I came up with Contrail, and they rhyme, and they aren't intended to be at all the same. All right, so it created it, so we're going to go to our brand new Supernova package, right? And, you know, I think I saw other people talking about how, actually, no, I'm going to move this Supernova to sites. I think that might need, because of how I have Valet set up, I think I need to do that. And then I'm gonna rerun Composer install just because I don't know if moving directories will really have an impact. Have I seen Takeout? I haven't used Takeout, and Takeout, I have seen it, I've heard of it, and I think it's a completely separate thing. Like, it's all based around Docker Compose, but from what I gather about Takeout is about installing these different services for anything in your local applications to use. So if you want to have a specific version of MySQL, you can use Takeout to set up and install MySQL without actually installing it. And then all of your applications can use that same instance of MySQL. That's my take on it. If that's wrong, then maybe it's really close. Yeah, so Supernova says it's a opinionated services with Docker Composer, which is, and again, that's exactly how I would describe Contrail, except hopefully it'll be clear what the differences are here. So I had at one point set up a symlink, I thought, so I'm going to try it again. This will make things a lot easier if I can actually just call Contrail. Okay, so Contrail, we're going to git init dot git add all of the stuff. Just so that we can kind of see which things Contrail's actually doing for us. Database, package, unit, public, versus bridge. Hate it when that happens. Oh, great. That really could have been worse, I suppose. Unless it moved everything into tests. Let's pretend I didn't do that, because that's just embarrassing. Move all of these to where they came from. No such file or directory. Oh. There we go. Git add bootstrap composer config. I think this is probably a sign that it's too late for me to be doing stuff. Resources, routes, server, storage, tests. So the one thing that I haven't done yet is why not git add dot? Because Yeah. That's probably what I should have done. All right, so we can see everything that was added. It was basically the whole project. Initial import. Okay, so I'm going to create a make directory Contrail and vi.contrail/big.yaml. And so I'm going to look at make sure there's no things in there. Okay. That actually looks pretty safe. Okay, so I'm going to copy the file from Dragonfly to the new one. So the actual bootstrapping process is what I'm kind of missing here, which is why I haven't really tried to publish it or talk about it too much yet. Did I just override it? No, okay. So the Contrail config YAML looks like this. It has a bunch of top-level things that you can enable or not. Password 142, awesome. So I'm essentially telling it to enable the web server, which is going to be Nginx. I'm enabling testing, so if you're doing like dusk testing and things like that. Oh, crud. Thank you for the reminder. So this is what the Contrail configuration looks like. These custom aliases, this is more work than it needs to be, and there's a bunch of these that I want to streamline because there's a bunch of aliases that are currently built in. So like Composer, for example, isn't listed here because that's built in. But some of them, I just didn't have a good place to put them just yet. So this first bit here is enabling the web server. This is enabling the testing web server. So if you're actually going to do like dusk testing or things like that, this enables that. Testing enables spinning up containers that are just like production, but are intended to be used for testing purposes. So it doesn't actually use the testing environment in some cases. It actually uses the proper, full-blown production configuration. It's just pointed at a different container. And then explicitly enabling Nginx, PHP, MySQL, Selenium, and Blackfire. These are the things that it will create. So I'm going to comment these out for now, so that we don't actually have access to these things just yet. So you get an idea of what a baseline thing would look like. And in fact, I'm going to take off web testing. I'm going to leave testing, and I'm going to take off Selenium and Blackfire. So if we look at this, the configuration can be quite simple, really. And then if I do Contrail build, what this does is it creates a project using the alias Supernova. So it gets the alias from the directory you're in. And if you look in Contrail Docker, you'll see that it creates a bunch of Docker Compose files for you. So it sets up a common one. It sets up one for if you're running with Traefik, both internal and external networks, and then also testing. So if we look at testing, we can see that it's creating an Nginx testing instance, PHP testing, which uses the PHP build, and you'll see it links to MySQL testing. So we have a completely separate instance of MySQL set up here with a bunch of relatively reasonable default username and passwords for things. The other thing is it sets these values the same for your PHP instance. So you don't have to know what it's going to do because it's using these values in both locations. So it should just work out of the box in most cases. Changing your production password. Nice. So having these here is nice. They're kind of composable. So for my actual environment, I'm going to go to blue screen again and hope I don't forget to turn it back again. Okay, cool. So I need to copy that. This one actually needed to be filtered. What my deal is tonight with some of these simple problems. Config override. Okay, so I'm going to go back. So if I look at my config override, this is where I can change the configuration for my local system. So the other thing I wanted to do was make sure that people could publish a Contrail configuration, but give people also the ability to override that easily. So especially with things like Trafic, I feel like that's something that not everybody wants or needs. But for Mac users, it's like super critical, so that you can actually communicate into the Docker environment in a more meaningful way. So what I've done for myself is I actually created an external network for Trafic. And so if we look at, say, Docker Compose, common Trafic, we can see that in this case, I'm setting up the network that is being connected to be both the internal network and Trafic. And then the PHP and MySQL networks only have to do internal. It's just the Nginx instance that needs to be accessible from Trafic. So with these things in place, actually executing them based on the project's Contrail configuration plus my override configuration needs a little bit of hand-holding. So if we look at Docker, you see there's a bunch of shell files, and so I'm just going to go in this directory, and this was something that I started to do a lot of with pretty much my first big project that I try to do a lot with Docker on. And what I ended up with was a bunch of different versions of ways to bring Docker Compose into being. So this Docker Compose, so Supernova 09 Docker Compose, is loading specifically the override, or the common file and the override file. If the override file exists, it also includes the env file if it exists, and then all of these other aliases are built on it. So Supernova up is Supernova Docker Compose up. The core things like being able to do a shell on PHP, run Composer, these things all come as they're all built on each other, and especially like Supernova PHP, and then there's Supernova Test PHP. If we look down at PHP unit, we see Supernova Test PHP, and then run PHP unit. So this directs which container it's going to be running at, because it's going to be calling a specific container name. So you end up with all of these little aliases like MySQL dump. The run stuff is pretty nice. And the general idea is that you end up with these things that you can spin up relatively quickly. And then the other part is I have Contrail shell and project level configuration directory. Oh, yeah. There we go. So Contrail shell will look at my current configuration. It will select the correct one of these. Oh, I should probably look at one of these. So, like if I was using NFS, which is what I was doing for a while, and external, if we look at that file, Contrail Docker shell, So you can see it's actually stacking the right number of, it's selecting everything based on the configuration that I've selected. So I've enabled NFS and I've enabled Trafic, and I'm using the external network. It knows to load common Trafic, testing Trafic, and then it loads Trafic external, because Trafic external versus Trafic internal do subtly different things. So the Contrail shell, this will actually look to see which things are configured both in the config.yaml, config override.yaml, and figures out which of the shell files it should create. And then it publishes it to a directory that, I'll show that in a minute. This directory is in config, Contrail. So publish shell files, when you do Contrail shell, you can tell it where it goes. So it picks the right one and drops this shell file in a directory for you. So this is the directory. When you publish, it also adds an extra one for Supernova rehash, so that if you have this environment loaded and you run Contrail build again, you can run Supernova rehash and it knows to go and reload that shell file for you. Otherwise, you have to log out and log back in or open a new tab or whatever. So this was a nice thing to do. So let's go ahead and see Supernova. Oh, so that's the other part. So I can't actually run that command easily, but I've been working on my dot files. And there is, let's see, it's might be in my zsharc. Yeah, so I did this thing to make it easier to extend my shell with these sorts of files. So what it looks at is these directories to see if any files exist, and then it sources them. So if we look in .dot files, projects.d, you'll see these are all of the projects that I have. So we can see it put Supernova in here. We've already looked at dflydev, we looked at Beau Simensen, so these things are there. And so that means that if I log back in, so if I log back in, now I should be able to run Supernova cd, which changes directory to that project. And then I should be able to up D, and this will hopefully build everything without any additional work being required. The other part of this is Supernova. Let's see, really hard to type, yo. Integrating this with Valet was another thing that I really wanted to make sure it worked. You can see here that it is working, but without HTTPS. I'm actually surprised that worked. I think this is actually running on base. So it's using just regular Valet. Okay, so Supernova is saying that Sail doesn't do any of this kind of stuff. Yeah, I didn't really think it did, but I wasn't sure either. I also wanted to use Contrail, like adding this to this basic Laravel project was relatively easy. So if I pick up another project and I don't have, say, PHP 7.4 anymore, it would be really easy for me to make this work. It's very much more wrapper versus this. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the other piece that I wanted to do, so I think that this is only working because I have Valet parked here. So let's do Valet. I think I can unpark. Unlink. Remove a park. Well, either way, I can override this, I believe. I don't think I can go to the secure version, so let's double check that. Yeah, so this is not private. So this sort of shows the core. Oh, forget. Valet forget. So if I run this now, it's just not going to work at all. Well, it shouldn't work at all. All right. Oh, unpark. Forget, remove a current working directory from Valet's list of paths. Yeah, so it is park. I don't know why this is still working. But we do know the HTTPS doesn't work. So that the other piece that I did was I worked pretty hard with the Valet project to be able to handle arbitrary proxies. And so Contrail Valet proxy is a command that tells you which Valet command to run to proxy. And then this is going to be using the actual Laravel container instead of trying to run local, running the local version of PHP. So if I run this now, I believe it should work. So yeah, so now this is actually running through HTTPS, running through Valet as a proxy with full HTTPS and all of that. So being able to do this was pretty critical. And I think that's the thing that I've seen people talk about with Sail, is that sort of like pretty much all of the static site generators in the past, like they would bind to whatever port they bind to, and it's just there. So many people care so much about HTTPS and dev, and I just don't get it. Yeah, well, so I don't necessarily care if it's HTTPS either. In this particular case, it actually showed that it worked or not. But with, so the problem with Sail is that Sail will bind one project to port 3000 or whatever port it is that it's running on. And so if you have 6 different projects running, you can only have one running at a time. So this sort of gets you the benefit of Valet running and serving all of these PLDs, but also being able to run things under Docker as well. And this all really only works because I'm running Trafic behind the scenes. So I really need to blog about how this is all set up, because it's gone from Docker being a pain in the butt for me. I think you can only run one Sail at a time. Double check that. Let's do Laravel Sail port. Yeah. So I think this might be what I saw recently. Seemed to change the actual port serving on, and I think that this is the problem, because if it's on this, if you can give it a different port, or the only reason you'd want to give it a different port is if it's colliding with something else. Laravel Sail bind. I feel like I did just see someone talking about this, but anyway, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and Trafic's black magic, and that was something that I kind of fought with too a little bit. So I wanted to show what my final configuration looks like. Suppose. Yeah, so I finally came up with a version of these things that actually worked for me, which was nice. And then this is the bit that is where that URL chunk came from. So that's why I'm pointing it here, because 8443 is where it actually goes. So, and those are all things that are configurable via the Contrail config. Like if you want to specify a specific port for these things, you can do that. But out of the box, it works pretty well. Yeah, sure thing, Supernova. When I am ready to get it pushed out there, I'll definitely let you know. I know that there are a couple of other people working on different things that are sort of similar, or at least in the same place. But especially if you watch me code, you can get a better idea of like how I work with it. So the aliases, the custom aliases. Let's see if we can get one of those, because those are my favorite. Because doing things, my way is great, but sometimes you want to be able to do things other ways. So let's do config YAML. So one of the things that I put in is fresh. That's one of mine. So if we do Supernova fresh, that doesn't do anything right now. And I wanted to make it easy to sort of build into the pipeline for building stuff. So the custom aliases let you do that. So custom aliases, let's say we want to do one called fresh. You can use the project alias, so this is basically the prefix, and then use that to build on something else that already exists, like Artisan. So I can run Supernova Artisan, and then I can do migrate fresh. So if I do that, again, this isn't going to work. I could log back in, and as soon as I log back in, it will work. Supernova fresh. Oh, it didn't actually work yet because I didn't publish it. My bad. So Contrail build, Contrail shell, and now if I log in, it will work. But before showing that, I'm just going to do Supernova rehash, and now I can run it. So I just wanted that rehash thing there, so it made life a little bit easier. Basically does the same thing as sourcing the ZHRC like you're recommending, which does the same sort of thing, but this is nice because it's just reloading that one bit. I do know that, so it rehashes this environment and only this environment. So I know that like some of the RC files, if you have like path equals I feel like sometimes if you do a like a dot on a bash RC or a ZHRC, sometimes you end up like completely going over and over and over and over. So what does Docker PS grep Supernova look like? Docker PS. So it creates everything more or less like it would be in the container. You can also do all of the things with Docker Compose, because that's what everything is based on. Compose. Yes, does that have a PS? Yeah. So you can see all of these things with that as well, and you can do things like build, which I'll have to do sometimes with build PHP. And so here you can just ask for PHP. You don't have to specify which PHP. And if you want to do something like without the cache or whatever, you can do those things as well. Thanks, man. Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad you think it's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it. And like I said, I've been dogfooding it with I guess 3 or 4 projects now. The one that started it was pretty hefty in terms of like implementation and all of the packages and stuff. What is the version of PHP baked into the config? Right now it's PHP 8, but even those sorts of things I want to make easy to do, so I can do big YAML, and I can do version 7.4. So if we want to do 7.4, we can do that. And build, up. Oh. I think this should actually try to build 7.4, but okay, we'll do. There we go. So now it's actually getting PHP 7.4. So we had to actually have it rebuild it But it should install everything the same way that it was before. And if we pull it up, we should be able to see if it's actually running PHP 4 or not. And then we'll have to do another up, and then everything should be running PHP 7.4. So this was really handy because I know I was tweeting about it for a while, but I had to migrate a site from Laravel 5.2 up to Laravel 8, and I got so tired of switching the system PHP between the different versions. I think it was at least on PHP 7 at the time, even though it was on a lower version of Laravel. But yeah, so switching between them, the aliases that I'd picked up at one point to try and make it easy to switch homebrew versions was just kind of a pain. So this became a must for me, because I wanted all of the projects I was normally working on to be on PHP 8, or at least on something modern, and then that application sort of became my test bed for different versions of PHP behind the scenes. So I'm going to do upd. All right, so it rebuilt PHP and it rebuilt Nginx. And then if we run php-v. All right, so it's running PHP 7.4 now. You can do a shell, and this actually gives you the same sort of tool, so you can go in and do things in the actual container. So yeah, that's when you see all of these weird things I'm doing, like Supernova Composer install, the alias behind the scenes there is rather lengthy. I think I'm not even sure how you would actually show the command that's actually running here, short of building it yourself. I don't know if the shell has the ability to sort of reverse engineer those things. Let's see. Some of the more complicated things. This package has... I need to make sure there's no... Yeah, okay. So this one probably doesn't need the version in there anymore, because 8 is the default, so I'm going to take that out. But this is actually doing some more custom things with adding additional packages, installing additional things like GD, giving GD actual configuration information. So these are all sort of things that you might need. Like, I don't want to go too overboard on this because I don't want this to become Docker Compose. But I do want to make sure that it is close enough that people can use it to spin up local dev environments relatively quickly and easily without having to learn how to wire Docker Compose together. And because it is using Docker Compose, you can actually use it to sort of figure things out, which is kind of nice. Let's see, I'll try one more here. I feel like I had another more interesting... Their site? Maybe it was... maybe it was Ninja Girl. No. Craft? No. Anyway, I do know that I have the ability to... create extra snippets of Docker files that can be appended to the bottom of like the PHP Docker file, especially because that's sometimes extra stuff. Some of the other things that are a little nasty with it right now are some hacks that I had from back in the day, like using this weird MySQL thing. I don't know how appropriate this actually is right now. So I don't really want to ship this and force people to use something that I had to use to get something to work a year and a half ago. Also, there's things like PCOV that I wanted to have enabled for testing purposes, for doing code coverage from time to time, but it actually conflicts with Blackfire. So the other thing I need to do is figure out how to create a method for easily tweaking these values, like or enabling and disabling PHP modules. I really think this makes sense to sort of target just PHP applications. So I think there's going to be a lot of stuff in here that will be probably specific to Laravel, because a lot of my projects are Laravel right now. But I also want to be able to use, probably set some stuff in there for like Symfony projects. And it looks like you just, Supernova just mentioned like Craft CMS. So yeah, I totally want to do some more things with other projects as well. I just right now I'm sort of dogfooding with the Laravel stuff because that's what my projects are in. So Supernova says they built their own dev environment on multipass, then rebuilt the next version on Docker Compose. Yeah, there's like, I feel like this probably is something that a lot of people are building on their own over and over again. Like a lot of people out there probably build their stuff. When I was working with Blackfire, that was pretty much my first big introduction to a project that was based on Docker, and that was just so painful on Mac to get working, like in a cross-platform sort of way. Like they had it all tweaked out to work really well, but trying to run it on a Mac, and it was just awful. So a bunch of this was built around the idea of trying to make it composable and make it easier to sort of support multiple systems, especially with the overrides stuff for Contrail override, being able to say that Contrail, this is the core system, this is what this application, this project, this thing needs, and then providing a way also to say, okay, well, actually, that's great, but I'm using Trafic, and here's the, I'm also using an external network. You can also name the external network if you need to. There's a bunch of different things that are hidden here. Because I still want it configurable, but also want it to be sort of almost convention over configuration. So it is heavily opinionated in some ways. But yeah, I wanted to be able to say, okay, in my case, I have this special Snowflake problem where I'm on a Mac and I need to do Trafic. And actually this had a bunch of stuff built in for like the NFS, handling NFS stuff. So that was in the Docker Compose project root NFS. So I've discovered that this isn't as big of an issue for me anymore. It was a huge issue like 2 years ago, year and a half ago. But in the process of doing this, I did some tests without NFS, and the differences between NFS and non-NFS were pretty minimal in terms of performance. But I have a feeling that it may depend on the project. So I don't think this is entirely lost. But this is another case of being able to fire up a specific combination of Docker Compose. They're static files, so they're predefined list of Docker Compose configurations that let you do a very specific thing. So here we have testing NFS Trafic external. So this is probably the edgiest of edge cases that this supports out of the box. Just to make sure that it's actually pulling in the NFS package project root. Otherwise, it doesn't actually need a project root to find it all. But this is a case where the normal project root just isn't going to work because the file sharing on Mac is just annoying. Not even annoying, it just doesn't work. The other cool thing that's more specific to Laravel is this run command, which is something I've actually been doing a lot of, especially on these streams. Like if I create a simple little file called, say, and I want to do log equals, I don't know if that'll work. I think it might because there's an alias. But if I run supernova run, it'll either work or it won't. And looks like it worked. So it sort of lets you bootstrap the whole PHP environment along with your autoloader, and it actually does some stuff with the Laravel stuff as well to make sure that everything's bootstrapped correctly. Error. Oh. This may not show anything, but it shouldn't fail either. Oh, it does. Okay. Undefined method. Error. Yeah. All right. Well, it's complaining that it doesn't know how to do info, which I'm not exactly sure why that's not working. But point is, it is actually trying to load something. So it did load an instance of something, and you're trying to run it. And so the big thing for that was I was doing a lot of stuff with Tinker for a while, and Tinkerwell, and those things were nice, but the issues I had with that was that you still had to reload everything all the time. I guess Tinkerwell didn't have that same problem necessarily, but if you were actually writing like Tinker scripts or things like that, it was a little difficult. Because once you fire up Tinker, I think I have, yeah, if you fire up Tinker, and there's no way to reload it, or maybe there is and I just don't know it yet, but it's not like a typical tool like this where, you know, you can easily like reset everything. It's like if the class is already defined, it's already defined, you can't define it again. So I would find myself working in Tinker and then having to Control-C and then go back into it. It didn't make me super happy. The other bit was you don't actually have to do anything to bootstrap Laravel, which was really nice. So that's kind of where the run command came from, is rather than actually going in Tinker and doing this stuff, a workflow I was already really familiar with was to just start writing code and then running it. And it always runs with the newest version of the code. It always runs with the newest version of the code. You don't actually have to do anything with it. It just works. And most of the time, I don't really need a REPL when I'm working with PHP stuff. So anyway, so that's the run thing, and I actually like that quite a bit, but run might be too generic for this, especially if it's building in all of the PHP stuff. Or especially the Laravel stuff. So anyway, I think that I probably should be done with the stream for the night. So we did a little bit of work here, working on trying to get a WordPress package built. We talked a little bit about how to build a package that can install things like migrations and setting up configuration and stuff like that. We discovered that you can't actually have auto discovery. I'm going to check one more time here. It does seem like you can't do auto discovery. Yeah, okay, I didn't miss a level. I thought maybe I missed a level, but it's extra Laravel providers. And we've got extra Laravel providers, so yeah, we discovered that you can't actually have things auto-discovered from the root package, and I think I'm actually going to try and submit that as a fix. It was either intentional or it was an oversight, and actually having tried to do it now, I think it makes a lot of sense, but that isn't always that doesn't always mean it's going to be accepted. So I think I'll try to submit it and see how that goes. So yeah, we did that, and then we talked a little bit about my other project, and super happy that Supernova is excited about potentially giving it a try. All right, well, thank you all, and I should be streaming again tomorrow night. I'll probably pick up the WordPress stuff. I'm giving a WordPress meetup talk on Headless WordPress with Laravel, so you guys are going to be in a week or two. So it's going to make sense for me to be on top of this stuff anyway. So thanks again for joining tonight, and have a good evening, and talk to you tomorrow. Bye.